It doesn't matter whether we're talking about academic subjects like biology or economics, or whether we're talking about sports, or whether we're talking about something more abstract like politics. A paradigm shift is something that comes along every now and again and completely changes the game. When I think about paradigm shifts, I think of Dr. Colton Davies. I think of his discoveries about the onions of South America, about the arrival of the Chinese in South America in the 1300s. These are things that have changed our understanding of the world. Today, for the first time in Into the Cosmos history, we have a guest live in studio, Dr. Colton Davies. Dr. Davies, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to Into the Cosmos.
Oh, please, it's my pleasure. I'm very happy to be here, and I know we run into a lot of eggheads in this field, but please, don't call me doctor. I'm much happier being called Colton.
Well, I appreciate the modesty, but come on, you've changed the whole field of food history.
Being a good historian isn't the same thing as being a good scientist. If there's any truly innovative insights coming out of my mind, it's not because I've created them, because I've understood something that people didn't understand before. It's just that I was able to find something that we didn't know about before.
Well, your ideas are pretty innovative. They've certainly changed the game for me. I remember when I first came across your first book, The Allium Women of the Pruvonian Rainforest, and it blew my mind. The cover,
Onion Woman.
the statuette on the cover.
Yeah, you're talking about the Onion Woman that we discovered in a village called Wangtang. That woman was called the Onion Woman by my assistant Joshua. When we first dug up this statuette, it was a 5-foot-tall piece of alabaster. It was carved to resemble a humanoid woman. She was definitely of human shape. She had 2 legs. She had 2 arms. She had a head, and the head did look humanoid. It had humanoid eyes with pupils. It had a mouth and a nose. But what was really interesting and how she got the name Onion Woman was that she had a rather bulbous posterior that really didn't resemble any of the women that lived in the Pruvonian rainforest. It really didn't look like any human woman any of us had seen before.
When we're talking bulbous, just how bulbous are we talking? Like how big?
Well, I like to tell people that if you were to take an inner tube, the type that you might use to slide down a hill in the wintertime, and put it around your waist, and just ignore the front half. Just look at the back half.
Amazing.
It looked like an inflated inner tube on the woman's posterior.
That's a popular look, you have to admit.
Well, maybe in 2019, but not in 1365 when we dated the statue back too. Back in those days, prior to the invention of refined corn syrup, and posteriors with this amount of volume simply didn't exist.
Right. So what we're dealing with is an ass out of time.
Yeah. You could definitely call it an ass out of time, and I was drawn to that ass, and really the question of how did it come to be in that time? And we researched it for years. We interviewed the local people. We dealt with their ancient literature. I had to learn to read their hieroglyphs. And really, we tried to do everything we could to get down to the bottom of how this woman came to be in the Pruvonian forest in the 1300s.
Right. So how did she come to be in the forest in the 1300s?
Well, you're asking a complex, multi-layer question, and I'll have to address it one layer at a time. And the first thing we really need to address is what does this statue represent? Does it represent a woman? Does it represent a real woman? Someone who is revered in the community? She could be a matriarch, perhaps a successful saleswoman. We don't know. But maybe she isn't meant to represent a real woman at all. Perhaps the physiology isn't meant to be a depiction of reality, but instead a representation of onionness in human form. She could be representing an onion spirit. She could be just a representation of onions in general to use to promote a good onion crop. We're not sure, but the implications there are pretty significant.
You are, of course, referring to the elephant in the room, the fact that the Provonian forest is in South America, and that in 1300s they didn't have connections to the old world at all. They didn't have the onion, so how could they possibly have a device made to boost onion crop production?
Well, that is one of the biggest questions, and due to extensive research, after interviewing over 300 people on the ground, including 8 chieftains, I've come to conclude that they encountered the onion, and that onion woman and the onion women are meant to represent onions. They are not real people. There were no women walking around looking as those statues do. They were indeed merely representations of onions.
It's not that I doubt you. It's just hard to believe. It's incredible. How did they encounter the onion?
Well, it's my belief, after the extensive research I've done, after all that I've seen, that the onion was brought to the Provonian forest by an expedition that left from the foothills of Mongolia. It was a group of Mongolian tribesmen that mastered the art of building magnificent sailing ships, and they sailed across the Pacific. They brought bounties and wondrous items to the people of Hawaii, and they continued until they encountered South America and landed in the Provonian forest.
I feel like an interaction of that magnitude would have more noticeable after effects.
Well, the echoes are there, not just in the onion, not just in the place names of villages like Wangtang and Shaolin. There are echoes throughout the cooking. Of course, we have the introduction of the onion, and the onion becomes a core part of the cuisine. Another thing that happens is the popularity of rolls. They would take local banana leaves, and they would roll up quinoa. They would have a prepared boiled quinoa that was soft, and they would roll it with the banana leaves. Inside, they would put fish or other meats. Unfortunately, at the time in South America, that could sometimes mean the meat of a child. And they would roll it in these leaves, and they would cut them into small medallions. And it's believed that this cuisine came from the Mongolians as well.
Sushi.
Yeah, it was sushi, Provonian style. As far as our evidence shows, there was no wasabi, but considering we were in South America, home of the hot pepper, that wasn't really a problem.
Right. If I picture a teriyaki chicken roll and picture having a jalapeno paste rather than a wasabi paste, it's probably still going to be pretty good.
Exactly. My research definitely shows that at the time and even now, the cuisine in the Provonian rainforest region is highly developed. It's quite nutritious. It's very delicious.
But what it's not doing is creating posteriors with the size of an inner tube.
Yeah, exactly. Even now, there really isn't any component of the Provonian diet that could account for such volume.
It's amazing. Colton, I want to thank you for joining me today.
It was my pleasure.
I want to extend to you an invitation to come back whenever you're interested. To
Absolutely.
talk about these matters or whatever.
Anytime.
To all the listeners out there, thanks for joining us today, and I hope to see you next time.